Welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast, where we aim on week to deliver strong analysis and big price winners. And last week was no exception, even from Ross National Hunt Millar, who not only gave us a nap winner at Uttoxeter with Frankie Duberlet at 3-1, but also tipped up a 28-1 winner at Newmarket with Cap Francais. Ross, you're beginning to make this look all so easy. You pretend you don't really like the flat, but we know actually you're doing your form study night in, night out. So that was excellent.
Well, getting those declarations at 30 seconds past the hour paid off, didn't it? And made use of every minute. And in Ian Williams we trust. He's a trainer in form.
Brilliant. Well, much the same, we hope. We've had a couple of other good results with Black Rod, my 11-1 nap scoring at Newmarket, and 2 place efforts from Turntable and Aidan, who was 4th in the Guineas. And I've actually gone and backed him for the Derby, a horse that should be followed throughout this season. And the Derby and the Oaks Clues is what we'll be focusing on for this podcast, as Lingfield hosts the Derby and Oaks trials. SBK are the title sponsors on the card, and we will begin this week with the SBK Lingfield Derby trial. Just the 5 heading to post. Walker Stars, the 10-11 favourite, United Nations 9-2, Natural World 11-2, Lionel 8-1, and Zechariah 8-1. And as we welcome back James Millman, great to have you back. We must remind listeners and those regular to this podcast that you tipped up Kariba's anti-post, so you must be gleeing from that result. But can Godolphin James continue on with their stranglehold over the 3-year-old Colts division in this Derby trial?
Well, Chester on day 1 on Wednesday, Adayar fought back, but I do think it will be Team Godolphin for the SBK Derby trial, which looks a pretty strong Derby trial, actually. We've got some nice horses taking part, and in Walker Stars in particular, 3rd in his debut at Newmarket. He won a maiden at Nottingham very, very nicely, similar route to what Adayar did last year. And he returned at Newbury with a tough win in a free runner race. Halfit had a huge price tag next to his name. And the fact that he was 5-4 on taking on Halfit suggests that they like him a lot over the winter. He's done well. And while he only won by a neck, it was a hard-fought success. So I was pleased with what he did. United Nations has already come over to the UK once for the Epsom Derby trial. And the fact that he got beat, only finished 4th, does suggest he's not particularly high in the Adayar pecking order. And it might well be the other Appleby runner, son of Frankel, Natural World, who's 1-1 at the same Newbury meeting that your Walker Stars won at. He might be the main danger, to be honest. I might have a Appleby 1-2 for the SBK Derby trial.
Yeah, William Buick is on board Walker Stars, and we've got Jack Mitchell in aboard Natural World. Jamie Spencer was booked at one stage, but they've done a bit of a switching around. But Jack Mitchell is on Natural World. The Guineas double winner, James Doyle, is at Ascot. So yeah, Troppy, but strong enough. I agree with that. There was a Derby winner amidst this group last year, and a group and a Gold Cup possible in Scope, who finished behind Third Realm in this race last year. TC, I'll come to you with these kind of smaller run, 5-runner races. I thought it would be worthwhile having a horse that can show a lot of natural sort of early pace, which Natural World did last time out, and maybe take the race by the scruff of the neck. How did you work it out?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Natural World go forward. I think Zechariah will be forward as well. That could just set it up for Walker Stars. I think Walker Stars is probably the Godolphin and Charlie Appleby number 1 going towards the Derby. Now, obviously, that's easy to say after New London got beat at Chester. But Walker Stars has all the credentials to win the Derby or to contest the Derby. And he's been programmed as if the Derby was the original target. As James said, very much like Adayar last year. He finished 2nd in this race. I don't actually know how Adayar got beat. I watched that replay a couple of times, and it's just bemusing. But look, Walker Stars could be the new Adayar. Obviously, lofty shout just there, because Adayar's a phenomenal racehorse. But Walker Stars has done nothing wrong to date. He was really impressive on his 2nd start when he hacked up. But he won a division of a Nottingham Maiden in the autumn. The time wasn't good. It was 2 seconds slower than the 1st division. But he was so green and babyish throughout the race. I just loved how he knuckled down in the closing furlong. And obviously the winner of the other division was Desert Crown, a horse that we both really like, Jess, and has also entered in the Derby. So the fact that it was slower than the 1st division, I don't think is necessarily a bad point. And if you're just going by visuals, there is nothing to say that Walker Stars couldn't be a potential top level middle distance horse. As James said, he beat a stable companion in Halfit on his reappearance. Again, he looked like he wasn't necessarily going to get there throughout the whole race, but then knuckled down again in the closing furlong. The step up and trip will definitely suit. Haffett hasn't necessarily boosted the form. He's been beaten since at short odds, but he's still highly regarded by connections. And I just think this Walk of Stars is open to so much more improvement. He doesn't look mature or physically ready to run in the Derby just yet, but we've still got a month. He's going to be progressing all the time. I think he's a good short price favourite here, Jess.
Yeah, 10 to 11, he's officially on rating £7 better than United Nations with a rating officially of 107. So the handicapper believes that he's a good bit clear of United Nations, who's got an official rating of 100. Ross, do you think it's as clear cut as the obvious horses in this race?
I can see why Walk of Stars is a short price favourite. He has looked visually impressive, but as TC touched on, Harfit was, beaten in a listed contest the next time. Berkshire Rebel, who was behind that pair, was beaten something in the distance of 13 lengths in the Chester Vase. So I think on that basis alone, you've got to look to try and take him on when all of these colts are going to be open to some sort of improvement. United Nations, I'm certain, is a terrible price. He is only that price because he's a Galileo Coolmore horse. If he was anywhere else in the country, he'd be twice, 3 times that price. The horse I do like, and it's slightly price driven, is the David Minizier Lionel. He was pretty close up behind Natural World at Newbury. Natural World was impressive, but he got a fairly enterprising ride from James Doyle, I felt, whereas Lionel fell out the stalls, was slowly away, endured all sorts of trouble up the home straight. And then once he did get into daylight, took a while for the penny to drop and sort of ran home really well late on. This is a little bit further in trip. I think he's from a really nice Normandy stud pedigree, plenty of stamina in the page. The dam is a half sister to Duncan, who won the Irish St. Ledger Group 1. And I just thought, stepping up in trip, there's plenty to come from him. And at the prices, he's far too big for me.
8-1 for Lionel, hoping to break his maiden tag for Ross at the third attempt. As Ross was saying, was third behind Natural World. He was really eye-catching, staying on strongly late on to suggest that breaking that maiden tag is not too far off. But he will have to reappear against this Natural World, who, even though he's the second string, is my selection. I really like that galloping style. Yes, it was an enterprising ride, but I think if Jack Mitchell sort of adopts the same tactics, I think he'll be hard to peg back. And he was able to keep up his momentum from those eye catchers in behind. He's bred on similar lines as Adayar, the Derby winner, being bifrancal, out of the Derby mare, that being the listed winner Skiffle. James Doyle actually dropped his whip that day at Newbury and had to push Natural World out hands and heels, which made it even a little bit more impressive considering he had so many challenges coming to him, but he was still able to keep his head in front. So I'm going to take on the favourite and the rest of the guys with Natural World, but 2 selections for Walk of Stars at Lionel, 8-1 for Ross, and myself, Natural World, at 11-2. Right, we'll head into the SBK Lingfield Oaks trial, 1 mile, 3.5 furlongs, the same distance they'll travel over. Bigger field, just slightly, and we've had some good renewals of this in the past. Annapurna did the double, winning this and then going on to win the Oaks in 2019. And Emily Dickinson is the 5-2 favourite. She's out of the Irish Oaks winner Chiquita, and TC, she didn't look like the winner of that maiden at Naas throughout, but Ryan Moores gave her quite an educational ride. She came through really strongly in the final 100 yards. She needed every inch of that trip, and she's only going to benefit from further.
Yeah, exactly. All 3 runs, in fact, she's been given an educational ride. First time out last year, she was clearly very green. They didn't really put her into the race at any point, hence why there's a duck egg next to her name. Then first time up this season, she finished 5th. Again, ridden right out the back, ridden cold, not really put into the race. But that race has worked out nicely. Above the Curve won it. Second was Thoughts on June. They finished first and second in the Cheshire Oaks earlier this week. So the form stacks up well. And if she had a clear run because she got chopped off at a crucial point, she would have been 3rd. So you can mark up that effort as well. And then last time, as you say, she needed every yard of the trip. She only got going late. But again, she got hampered at a crucial stage. She was only ridden out hands and heels, and she won decisively. It wasn't a great race, but she's going to definitely improve for the step up in trip. As you say, she's out of Chiquita, who won the Irish Oaks. So I think this has kind of always been the aim for her, to try and go down the Oaks route. Chiquita obviously was with Alan de Prey and then moved to Aidan O'Brien. So Aidan O'Brien kind of knows the family as well. And I just think this race is pretty weak, to be honest. Like, there is some depth in there, but there isn't a lot of depth. All of those horses with a current rating need to improve upwards of a stone to contend the finish. Obviously, you've got 2 horses that have won first time up. who sit second and third in the betting, which are intriguing runners, but we don't really know their level just yet. And the Gosden horse, who I actually thought would be shorter price than she is, she won on the all-weather, so she also has to prove that she handles turf. I just think Emily Dickinson's the most solid option in the race. She's shorter than I hoped she would be, which might be enough to put me off the bet, but I definitely think she's the most likely winner.
Yeah, she's 5-2 favourite currently as it stands. She's one of the more notable Coolmore horses to be by the great Dabawi as well. It's really, really likeable pedigree. And as TC was saying, she's definitely been ridden to try and see how far she needs, because they've been riding her cold. Be interesting to see what Ryan Moore does with her here, because they obviously know that she can stay and will want this trip against some fillies that, as I say, are kind of unexposed. But James Belt Buckle, her nearest rival, she beat a 75 rated filly by a neck on her debut. So there's not a huge amount to go on there, is there really?
No, there's not much form. Generally, the Lingfield Oaks trial is a good opportunity for people to try and steal a bit of black type for a filly that's probably only going to be 90 at best. And we've had winners go on to do well at Epsom, but the minor places normally lacks a race that lacks a bit of strength in depth. And you've got to remember with Chiquita, the quirks that she had to dam of Emily Dickinson, and that's got to be a worry going forward. And she's been ridden very patiently, but is that because she's a little bit quirky like her mother? So fascinating to see how she gets on with the quirks of Lingfield. Rogue Millennium for me looked a cracking buy. There's been a few come out of Shadwell, being bought well, and have won first time out. It's another horse slightly close to your heart, but Rogue Millennium, a Dubarwi filly, not a great Shadwell family actually. That's probably why she only cost £35,000 despite being a Dubarwi, and she made a winning debut for Tom Clover at Wetherby for the Rose Gallery. Again, a little bit like Belt Buckle, it wasn't the strongest of races, but the fact two newcomers claimed clear, an odds-on shot back in third, trained by Charlie Fellows, I think the form reads quite well, and she deserves an attempt at black type. Emily Dickinson, I'm just not entirely convinced by. And the two winners, I prefer Rogue Millennium to Belt Buckle. The one we know all about is Mystic Wells, who went to Brighton, good bit of placing, won a 20 grand handicap 11 days ago. Handing Brighton, she'll handle the track well. That's Mystic Wells, and I think she'll probably get a bit of black type, but she shouldn't be good enough. So I'll take a chance on Rogue Millennium, which is a slightly disappointing Oaks trial, but it's what it normally is, to be fair. You normally get a good winner, potentially, or fillies that just aren't quite up to this grade, but hopefully we see a bit of a star emerge, and that could be Rogue Millennium.
Yeah, you have to go back to 2016. Aidan O'Brien, winner of this race, that was Seventh Heaven. But yes, Emily Dickinson, she does have all the credentials on paper, and she's also got a good amount of racecourse experience. But Mystic Wells really does hold as much racecourse experience as you need, and you've got to keep high in your mind. And I think that George Bowie sends out now the classic winning trainer, but she sets a bit of a standard with that mark of 90. So fascinating. Her Rogue Millennium, I echo that. I think that I love this story that she's bought for 35,000 guineas, but was given a high amount of a solid amount of ratings from Marcus Tregonning to the Tom Clover yard before she went to the sales, and she won. She won that on debut at Wetherby, but that race has been won by some serious fillies in the past. Fanny Logan, Noon Star, they've all come out of it. So even though it might not have been the strongest, it has attracted some good fillies. So I'm with you there, James. But Ross, as we're saying, there's kind of a race of two halves. There's fillies with the experience, and there could be anything fillies as well. But you've always got to have a huge amount of respect to these Aidan O'Brien types, and she's clearly going the right way of any of them.
Well, I always look, can I beat the favourite? That's my starting point of any race. And she's got a profile of a horse I'd love to take on. You know, she's, as James mentioned, the dam had a slightly suspect temperament. She's certainly been learning on the job. She hasn't looked an out-and-out superstar straight away. But then when you look through them, you'd be very disappointed if any of these were really good enough to beat her. As you touched on, Belt Buckle beat a 75 rated horse by a neck on the all-weather, so has to prove that she can do it on the turf. Rogue Millennium, Charlie Fellows' horse that she beat, is only rated 78. It was 2 lengths. Is that going to be enough? You suspect not. And is the full brother Catum is 84 rated. Mystic Wells, you respect, and you've got to respect, because George Bowie can do no wrong, whether it's 2-year-olds or handicappers, and he's now a classic winning trainer. But I have a slight suspicion that this might not be her trip. You know, Kitten's Joy, I just wonder whether she's going to want this trip. And she's unlikely to be good enough. So slightly reluctantly, the selection is Emily Dickinson, but I will be keeping my money firmly in my pocket and just watching to see whether she can step up and deliver on the pedigree that she has.
Okay, interesting. Emily Dickinson for TC and for Ross. As I said, I'm going to stick with Road Millennium. I think that she could be an exciting filly for Tom Clover and a good pickup. I'm going to have a small each way selection as well in here with Speak, who is definitely, in terms of the rating, she comes below Mystic Well. She only rated 84, but she was impressive when she won on debut. She was disappointed when she was beaten a long way by Inspiral on her second start in the May Hill Stakes. But she comes from a nice family by Sea the Moon. She's closely related to Valley Forge, a good staying handicapper, and I think she will appreciate the step up in trip. And I think she's just a quite nice price for something like this, where it isn't the most competitive. It's 10-1. There was a bit of an upset last year as well, and I'm hoping that her form from her last race at Windsor is going to start working out as well. So I'm backing her to get involved here. So we'll head into the next SBK race that we're going to feature, which is the Chartwell Filly Stakes, which is over 7 furlongs at 350 for the 3-year-old fillies and upwards. She Do is 130 favourite, Chapoya is 7-2, Thunder Beauty 11-2, 13-2 for Wren's Breath, and Symphony Perfect. So I had a good look at this, and there are the two outsiders of the pack, Rosemary and Time, who's 18-1, and Lola Showgirl, who's 16-1, are the only two with winning form over 7 furlongs. Plenty of the lead protagonists here are either untested at 7 or have been beaten over this trip. So there's a couple of question marks about all of them, I suppose, TC. Or is there something that you're quite confident is going to outdo that little thought I had in my mind?
No, I think your thought is very accurate, and 7 furlongs is a worry for my selection, which is Chakoya. However, at the 5-day stage, I was all over Bounce the Blues, and I'm astounded that she's not in this field. She ran second in this race last year. Put her in the tracker because I thought she was going to, obviously she's gone to Haydock instead, but I thought she was going to run in this race and win it. So I was a bit disappointed because she was going to be the nap of the day. However, I think her absence paves the way for Chakoya, who's the class act in this field. As you say, most of them have stamina doubts. I think most of them have other worries as well: ground, track, the level of form that they've run to, and the likes of Shidu can also race very keenly. So there are a lot of question marks about some of these. Shidu actually beat Chakoya last year in the Boadicea Stakes at Newmarket, but Shidu had the perfect run, race against the near side rail, had just the ideal trip, whereas Chakoya was breaking from a low gate. She did the best of any horse that broke from a low stall. She tracked across, but she was still 4 horse widths off the rail, which is not where you wanted to be that day at Newmarket. She finished 4th, a good 4th, only beating 3/4 of a length. I think she was probably the best filly in that race. And the fact that Shidu is actually still favourite over Chakoya this time just makes Chakoya the bet in here.
And she's got Ryan Moore on board, which you must have been pleased to see. He's got winning form with her coming back from last September. So that's a nice jockey booking. Yeah,
well, whenever Ryan Moore's on a horse, it's always a positive. I know the Twitter people, let's use people because I can think of plenty of worse words, don't like Ryan Moore, but look, this guy's an incredible rider, has been for years, riding out of his skin this week. In fact, he's just ridden a win at Chester as I speak. So look, there's no rather jockey that I'd rather on board than Ryan Moore.
Yeah, he rides Chester well, and he rides Lingfield pretty nicely as well. Okay, Chakoya, they're at 7-2 for TC. I'll come to Ross next. I thought this was quite tricky, this race, competitive enough, but to that point about the trip concerns, and as TC adds, also the ground as well. There's sort of the 3-year-olds that are trying to improve on now and sort of open company, so it's quite tough.
Yeah, absolutely, and I come down on one that is going to have to step up a little bit. The Kevin Philippart de Foy trained Pearl Glory. She gets that little bit of weight for age allowance. You could say that she's got a question mark to answer over 7 furlongs, given that she was quite well beaten when she tried it at the back end of last year. But both her wins at 6 furlong, she was doing all her best work late on. She was then very unlucky in the Dick Pool Stakes over 6 furlongs, where she had all sorts of traffic problems and flew home to only just be denied. And then went to the Oh So Sharp Stakes and just had no luck in running whatsoever. All the action happened up the inside rail. She was posted pretty wide on the track, and wasn't given a hard time when she was beaten. So the 5.5 lengths she was officially beaten is probably not a fair reflection. I'm certain she'll stay this 7 furlongs. Yes, she has to step up, but as you say, in a wide open race, I was prepared to chance her at a bit of a price. And a TC stat that just caught my eye: Ben Curtis, 11 from 43 for 26% is a pretty decent strike rate. It doesn't matter all that much to me, but it does suggest that he's going to be feeling good about things. He'll be feeling confident, and you probably do need that in a race where, when the gap's open, you have to be decisive about what you want to do.
Yeah, certainly. 9 to 1 for Pearl Glory. He's been spending a lot of time with George Bowie as well, so I think a lot of those figures must be coming from the horses that he's getting on board for the classic winning trainer. Okay, so Pearl Glory then for Ross. James, how did you solve this puzzle?
Well, the key thing at Lingfield for me is that stands rail, which leads to very messy racing, because it can be whoever grabs the rail first has a huge advantage, but it's a bit of a rough race trying to get across. And Wren's Breath would be the one for me from stall 6. I like Pearl Glory. My only concern is she wasn't the biggest last year, and how much she's going to train out from 2 to 3, because say if you ignore the Newmarket end of the season, she had a pretty progressive profile, and Team Valor bought into her. So it's a horse that Kevin Pillabot would love to do very well with. But I thought Wren's Breath, the fact that she won a listed race and just a second start for Henry de Bromhead at Naas, that was a pretty impressive effort, having been beaten neck on debut. Qatar Racing bought into her. Disappointed at Doncaster behind Just Beautiful, but not quite sure what happened there. We've not seen her for 241 days. She might be a bit of a fragile filly, but she could be quite a nice type. Fortunately, Rachel Blackmore's not riding. Kieran Fallon, the retained rider for Qatar, is on board and hasn't ridden there before, which would be a negative. But I felt she could be quite useful. Wren's Breath in a race which is going to be tricky. She'll do, and Jacoya had handicap form with some of our fillies. I think they're vulnerable. It's not a particularly strong Group 3. We've got nothing rated over 100. So a filly that won a listed race and just a second start in Wren's Breath, she might just be one that's got the class to win a race like this.
It's really worth watching back that race at Naas, because everything went wrong for her that could have done wrong, and she still was able to come home after being, I think she was hampered. She had to come from far back, and then she nearly ran off the track, I think, right at the end of the race. So she's clearly got a lot of talent, but she was very green then, and they've given her plenty of time to strengthen up. So Henry de Bromhead sends over Wren's Breath for James, who is 13 to 2. I'm going to go with a different selection, so we're all going different places. I like Symphony Perfect for Richard Hannon. She's 13 to 2. She was campaigned as a sprinter last season, and she was on the go a lot, and she's already had 2 runs under her belt for this season at 3. She clearly thrives off her racing, and she ended her season last year with a deserved success in the listed race at Newmarket, where she was certainly not stopping over 6 furlongs, and that can take a bit of guessing as well. And I thought her run at Chelmsford last time, where she was second, but she was keeping on really well, and showed that this step up to the 7 furlong should be within her reach. And she is rated 100. So officially on ratings, she's the highest rated, but she gets a weight allowance from the due to her age being a 3-year-old. So she is 13 to 2. So we've got a bit of everything for you in the Chartwell Fillies Stakes. Right, we'll head on to the best betting heat of the weekend at Ascot. This is the Victoria Cup over 7 furlongs. And these 7 furlong miler types will probably become a bit like our 2.5 mile chasers that we got used to over the National Hunt season. We'll see a lot of these throughout the season competing against each other. And it's a good field. So 7 to 1 the field as it stands. Dark Shift is leading it. Fresh is 10 to 1. Chief of Chiefs is 10 to 1. And then you've got 16 to 1 for essentially whoever you want after that, and bigger the rest. So this is always a cracking puzzle to solve. And TC, you love a stat. Let's start with the stalls, because you want to be looking high. Since 2013, I've seen only 4 horses have finished in the first 4 from single figure stalls. And so you don't want to be too wide on either side. And it looks like there could be a bit of pace around. I thought that might come from Hieronymus from stall 20. How crucial do you think that stall and where you come from at Ascot is?
Yeah, always on the straight course at Ascot in these big sprints. I want to be drawn middle to high. I don't think necessarily you have to be in 20 or 20 plus. I think you need to be 15 and then higher. They tend to race towards the near side, which is obviously the high draws, but sometimes they congregate down the middle. You just don't want to be on the wing, basically. And if you're drawn low, the likelihood is you're going to be on the wing in like an arrow formation. So I have focused on those drawn middle to high. One of them is actually going towards the low draws, but hopefully not too low. I have been waiting for this kind of race for about 7 months. I love these big field handicaps. They're awful for tipsters because you're on a hiding to nothing, but they're great for punters because you're going to get good value. There are 2 horses in here that I like. In fact, I think I've only had 1 winner of the Victoria Cup. So those follow me and probably thinking, okay, we need a bit of form here. But that winner was last year in River Nymph. He's back again. He's an intriguing runner. He's only £2 higher in the handicap. I just hated that reappearance run. It didn't really show enough for me. And that was just enough to put me off him. I wouldn't be surprised if he bounced right back to something like his best though. So keep him on the shortlist just in case. The 2 that I have come down on, the first one is my best bet in the race, which is Fresh for trainer James Fanshawe. James Fanshawe just does so well in these big field sprint handicaps at Ascot. Recent record doesn't tell you as much, but if you just remember back to the great days of 10, 15 years ago, he was farming these races with Jamie Spencer and Johnny Murtagh week in, week out. So I wouldn't be worried about his recent stats at Ascot. Fresh is one of the biggest eye catches of the flat season so far when he finished second on his reappearance at Kempton. You just can't win against the rail if you switch on the cutaway to the inside. You cannot physically win. And Fresh did that and almost got up in the dying strides. It was a massive eye-catching run. He's back to a nice mark. And his form figures at Ascot read 2-1, 2-3. The last 3 efforts, all in big field handicaps. This is absolutely perfect for him. He's drawn nicely as well in a double figure gate. The other one's a much bigger price, and that's Potmaster. Now he's drawn an 11. It's a slight worry. He's towards the low side, as I say. But Safi Osborne takes the ride, which I think is a great booking. That's £3 off. And Potmaster's also very well handicapped anyway, based on last season's efforts. The reappearance run is very much like River Nymph's reappearance run. Didn't show much, but that was a clear prep for this. He's a much bigger price than I thought he would be at around 25 to 1 as well. I think Potmaster's worth a decent each way alongside Fresh.
22 to 1 we can give you for Potmaster as it stands. Fresh 10 to 1, a really compelling case for this horse. And James Fanshawe, who's been slightly quiet, has actually come back into a good bit of form. He's had 2 winners from 7 runners, which is nice to see right in time for the Victoria Cup. But he does need to win for the first time over 7 furlongs, which is just something that I have obviously taken a big interest in the trips of every horse for this weekend. But that was my slight concern for him. But you think that he'll be okay? Yeah,
I think it'll be fine for him. He does need everything to go right. He needs a clear passage. He tends to be ridden from off the speed like most of James Fanshawe's sprinters. I don't think the trip's a problem with him. He just needs to be delivered at the perfect moment.
Yeah, it is all about luck in this kind of race. Near side was the preferred place last year. As TC was saying, the first 12 home all came from that near side, with Zip from stall 14 heading towards the near rail and sort of leading that pack. So Ross, have you looked at that, and is that sort of altered your thinking when it's come to this race?
It is as TC was talking, but no. No, the one I came down on is a horse I've got a lot of time for. He's a real trier. Is Ropey Guest of George Margerson. He was 6th in this, only beaten a couple of lengths last year off a £5 higher mark. I think he does like this stiff 7 furlongs. He's got some good form without winning at Ascot. He doesn't win all that much anyway, including 4th in the 2020 Jersey Stakes. George Margerson hasn't run all that many so far this year, but he's 2 from 3 in the last 14 days. So the horses are clearly in good form. And I thought off a £5 lower mark, he could go well, but I'm revising that as TC is telling me I'm drawn on the wrong part of the track.
He was drawn in stall 23 last year. He's got 6 this year. So what are we thinking about that, TC? It's not.
Hey, I'd rather be on Ropey Guest than Dark Shift, who's the favourite currently drawn in stall 4. Ropey Guest actually ran really well in this race last year, so I can see the logic. Okay,
so I'd rather be against Dark Shift. James Millman might have words for that.
Well, the draw isn't great, is it? But the thing is, pre-draw, pre-Dex, he was the obvious one. He's had 4 runs at Ascot, 3 wins and a 4th. Charlie Hills has hit the ground absolutely running this season. And a lot of seemingly exposed horses have improved nicely over the winter, whereas Dark Shift was pretty progressive, winning his last 2 starts at Ascot. He's got loads of form over 7 furlongs as well, which is also pretty key. Just stall 4, and that well could be a big negative. But for me, he's the best handicapped. He's the most progressive, and he's got such a good record over the track, which is a place which is really course form comes to the fore, like Ropey Guest, who's nearly always thereabouts in these big handicaps, pick up the places. So stall 4, he may win his side and not come anywhere, and that has been the case in recent years with this Victoria Cup. So that's obviously a negative, but against that, I think he's a very nice type. If you're going to stick to ones drawn high, the Kevin Phillipart, the Foy runner, Val Fortino, who was second to Bless Him at Newcastle, would be a one for your high numbers, because Benoit Sayat is a very good £7 claim. He's not having too many rides, so that what he is doing, he's getting a few winners on the board anyway. After that absence, after winning the Lincoln last year, but I just felt he could be well handicapped. If the draws are complete and that's a no-go, as TC says, he would be your high one, Val Fortino. But I do think that Dark Shift is one for these big Ascot handicaps this year, and I'm not going to change my mind in case he does bolt up, but I think he's the best treated.
Yeah, well, the betting is in agreement with you, 7-1. He could even get bigger than that because of that draw element. Baffletino, I thought it was very interesting having his second start with the trainers. It's moving from, I think it was Joseph O'Brien, his son of Newbay, and he clearly showed that he's in very good form with himself with that second at Newcastle. Yeah, definitely one to think about with this race. He's 16-1, as is the horse that I'm going to tip up, which is Al Reb, 16-1. I think that this horse has been in cracking form over the winter. He's another horse for Kevin Phillipart de Foy. He was previously with Charlie Hills. He's had the 2 wins with this new stable, both on the all-weather, but he did prove effective on the turf behind Boardman, where he was just denied. He's a big grey horse. You always spot him. He showed a really willing attitude. He's fairly unexposed. He has a featherweight of 8'6". He's a man with bundles of experience in Franny Norton on board as well. I'm just want to have a quick look at the draw now that we're getting a little bit panicked about it, but I'm fairly certain when I looked at it, I wasn't too concerned where he was coming from. 24, that's just about okay. I'm happy with that. And I think he can continue on, which is quite a nice upward trajectory, and I think a solid pace that he should have to aim at with the likes of the horse coming out of stall 20, Hieronymus, so I'd imagine will go out and set the early clip. He's not drawn too far away from him, so that will pan out quite nicely with him. I'm going to give another selection, if I may, and that's the Turpinator. He's also 16-1, like a lot of these horses are as it stands. He won on Racecourse debut for this yard on the all-weather, and then went to Newbury for what was a really decent renewal of the Spring Cup. He wasn't disgraced. He was fairly free early on. There'll be more pace in this race, and although he comes out of 12, I think George Rook will be just about okay from there to get to where the pace is. I think that he's the kind of horse that will flourish in this big run of field. So that is a tricky enough edition of the Victoria Cup. Fresh and Popmaster for TC, Ropey Guest for Ross, James is with Dark Shift, and I'm with Al Red and the Turpinator. And that finishes off our looks at the main races throughout the weekend this Saturday. We've got a new customer offer. As always, you can get £30 in free bets by depositing £10, and that should help you have a little bit in your account for the naps and the next best. So with a very busy weekend of racing up and down the country, we'll give the guys the opportunity to have a selection for wherever they want. So James, we've been without you for the last few weeks, so over to you for your nap and your next best.
Yeah, I'm doing a Ross Millar, actually. I'm going to head to Haydock and go for part of their jumps section of the card. And Sebastopol, a horse who I put up when unfortunately came down at the Thursday Day's Scottish Grand National meeting. He went on to win at Chepstow quite convincingly back over fences last time. He reverts to hurdles for the Swinton, and he's actually £9 lower over the smaller obstacles. He was second at Toxter for £1 lower mark the last time he ran in this sphere, and he looked fantastic when I saw him at Kempton when he won back in March. So with Tom Lacey having 2 winners again yesterday, I just felt that he's too big a price likely for the Swinton just because he's back over hurdles now. I thought he could be a bit of each-way value for the nap. And the next best is just a filly I know quite well, For a Day. She's been consistent, placed quite a few times. Handicapped about right. If we get a nice bit of rain at Nottingham, she won't be too far away in the 2:10.
Okay, best of luck with your runners, and especially for a day. That's James. We'll head on to Ross next, and we'd imagine, and we'll be horrified if there is a jumper in here.
Well, you all thought I was going to go to Haydock for the jumpers, and you were wrong.
Yeah.
Because my nap has come from the 7:20 at Warwick.
Wow.
And a bit like James' selection, Court and Bold reverts to hurdles from fences. It's £5 lower over hurdles and fences, and is now for mark of 125, having been as high as 141 when chasing home McFabulous in the Persian War. He'll love this good ground. He's down to a nice mark, and I thought John Joe O'Neill Jr. was a eye-catching booking for Fergal O'Brien. And then the next best does indeed come from Haydock in the 2:25. Honest Vic, who for a moment at Cheltenham I thought was going to go well for me at a big price, and unfortunately Richard Patrick got rather overexcited and went rather too soon down the hill and didn't quite get home, having stumbled at the back of the last. But he still finished 5th. It was a really big run. He's still on the same mark of 141. He'll love this nice ground. He's nicely handicapped, and I think he can make amends here.
Okay, thanks to Ross for his nap and next best. On to TC, where I know you've got your priorities will be very much the Kentucky Derby for this weekend, and it'd be great to hear what you think in terms of that feature race. But your nap and next best from the UK.
Sure, well, you might have to wait to hear the Kentucky Derby. I have to say, it's going to be on the SBK Saturday Night Selections, which is our new podcast. There's a little plug for you. New podcast going live on Saturday on all major platforms, like you can see, as you can see this podcast. So we'll keep the Kentucky Derby on the down low until Saturday. But the nap is in the 5:18 at Haydock, a horse called Out From Under, who you're probably hating right now because he beat one of your horses last time, Jess. That form's actually worked out really well because Woodington ran nicely the other day, just very unlucky to be beaten at a narrow margin. This is a pretty good 0-95 handicap, I have to say, but Out From Under looks really well treated in my view. Last year, he should have won second time up. Actually, he crossed the line in front, but he got DQ'd for hanging across the track. Then on his final start last year, he got beaten nose, chinned right on the line by a William Haggis trained runner who's rated 87 called Vintage Choice. If that is to be believed, then Out From Under is at least as good as 86, 87. He's able to run off 82 in this race, despite winning his maiden since, beating Woodington, who's made the form look decent next time up. I just think Out From Under will win this race, the 5:18 at Haydock. And the next best, we've already covered it, is Chakoya in the 350 at Lingfield. I have to say this is a rather tentative next best, purely because I didn't want to tip Walk of Stars at odds on as my next best in the SBK Derby Trial, but we'll go for Chakoya in the 350 at Lingfield. I think she's probably the best filly in the race. She has to prove that she handles 7 furlongs. Last time out, she raced against the bias at Newmarket. I think if she can get on the right part of the track at Lingfield, she'll win this race.
Okay, interesting selections to Chakoya, Out From Under for TC. I am going to go with a horse that we have already discussed on the pod, and that came from TC. You're going to have Bounce the Blues as your selection in the Chartwell stakes, but she goes up to Haydock instead. Now, Andrew Balding, I could give him plenty of credit for a lot of things, but he's very, very good at placing horses. And I believe he's gone up to Haydock instead of going for the Fillies only option, because she gets weight from the geldings here. She is a horse that goes very fresh, as she did after a long break at Ascot, where she was just beaten by With Thanks in a listed race. Andrew has sent David Probert, his number one jockey here, in particular to Haydock to ride her. He could be all over the country, anywhere in the country if Andrew wanted. And I think that this filly, who's now a 5-year-old, will be seeing her really good effect here at Haydock. So I've napped her in the 3:35. My next best will be Al Red in the Victoria Cup at Ascot for all the reasons we have discussed on this podcast. So a lot to choose from in terms of next bests and naps throughout the weekend from Ross, from James, and from TC. Plenty of racing to look forward to. We'll be back next week to digest it, hopefully to reel out some of the winners that we hopefully have found, and look ahead to the weekend's action from next week. But make sure to like, subscribe. TC's done a little bit to make sure that you know about the additional podcast, but don't forget that this is your number one. We'll be back next week. Thanks to the guys, and we'll see you soon.